already through the Senate and received a unanimous vote and passage in the Senate. It now moves to the House of Representatives for committee work and for passage. There's been a lot of information, some of which has been accurate, some of which has not been, about police jurisdictions, extraterritorial jurisdictions, planning jurisdictions, and things of that nature in the press. And I want to make sure that I answer your questions and provide as many factual or as many facts as I can so that y'all have good information to work off of. And then we will let the debate proceed from there. So to start with, I wanted to say that that Senate Bill 107, as filed, does not eliminate police jurisdictions. It freezes police jurisdictions where they are. And you can see from these maps that a lot of these police jurisdictions are pretty expansive. The idea is to let municipalities grow into police jurisdictions over time so that they have the opportunity to grow into them as they continue to expand and annex. But to freeze them so they do not continue to grow. Most police jurisdictions in our county, actually in Baldwin County, can't grow anymore because they bump into other municipalities or other police jurisdictions as they are. So that the important part there is the lack of impact on most of these things. It also continues to allow municipalities to collect sales tax revenue in those police jurisdictions to fund public safety activities in those police jurisdictions. This is something that is important to make sure we continue to allow the funding of those. Municipal leaders across the state of Alabama are very well aware of this legislation. This is legislation that I have sponsored every single year that I've been in the Alabama legislature and legislation that I advocated when I was on the county commission. It enjoys support from the business communities, from electric cooperatives, from the County Commission Association, et cetera, and passed again out of the Senate 30-0 last week. This legislation, as amended, also allows municipalities to continue to exercise a planning jurisdiction for 1.5 miles. Currently, that can be done well outside municipal limits. This brings that back into a reasonable 1.5 mile area. The concern overall has been the ability of a municipality to tax, police, and regulate folks that simply can't vote for them. They don't have a voice for them with them in municipal elections, and to try to rein this in. Alabama is one of only 3 states in the country that has wide-ranging police and extraterritorial jurisdictions that impact areas well outside their municipality. And what we're trying to do is find a way to get folks back on the right side of the line, if you will, but to do so in a responsible manner that allows municipalities and counties the ability to accomplish this goal without causing any undue harm or impact. It's worth noting that a number of municipalities have reached out to me through this entire process and have provided amendments, proposed amendments, most of which I have accepted either in the form of friendly amendments or amendments that I made in the drafting of the bill to begin with, or even one that I made on the floor. And those municipalities have been from as far south as Orange Beach to as far north as Decatur. So those that have worked with us to try to amend this bill to get it done have been met with, I've been receptive to that, and I will continue to be as this legislation moves through the House. It is important to note that this legislation, as it is written now, precludes the enforcement of municipal ordinances outside of city limits. This is a big deal for my constituents and one I hear from an awful lot. The statute as currently written allows for police and sanitary regulations to be enforced within police jurisdictions. Well, municipalities across the state have oftentimes read that very broadly to include any municipal ordinance. That has everything, it can include leash laws, noise ordinances, dust ordinances, most recently here sign ordinances, and things of that nature. I've heard of instances where a farmer had a sign that said fresh okra or pecans in their front yard, well south or east or west of town, and they were being told that they couldn't have the sign because it violated the city's municipal ordinance. We're trying to rectify that with this. It's worth noting also that for folks around the state who have been caught by a municipal speed trap from a small locality, those are usually prosecuted in municipal court. Under this, they will go to district court So you'll see that happening. A lot of the argument that I've heard back from some of the mayors is that this is a money issue for them, that this is a revenue concern from them. And I think that's a fair conversation to have. For entirely too long, municipalities have been taxing and policing and regulating folks outside their corporate limits and really gaining an awful lot of revenue off of them. And from a public policy standpoint, we need to ask the question, is this the right thing to do? I think that's not the case, and I think that the appropriate revenue receiver on that end is the county commissions, where appropriate, and that municipal budgets should be written and balanced on, on municipal revenues within the corporate limits. This bill also allows a municipality to reduce its police jurisdiction in half-mile increments. Again, a nod to the municipalities. Heretofore, municipalities have only been allowed to either take it or leave it. 3 miles or nothing if you're over 6,000, or 1.5 miles or nothing if you're under 6,000. This legislation allows, as a result of an amendment by a mayor, a suggested amendment by the mayor of Alberta, as a matter of fact, allows municipalities to find what fits them best so that they can exercise this authority in increments. It clarifies audit requirements that are currently in statute. Unfortunately, while we've had audit requirements that this money be spent as it is collected in police jurisdictions for the benefit of public safety in those police jurisdictions, very few, a small fraction of the municipalities have actually ever submitted an audit to the Auditor of Public Accounts indicating that this is in fact happening. So this clears that up. I look forward to continuing to working with municipalities on this legislation. We understand that change is hard. We are doing everything we can to make sure that we rectify what I think is a public policy error, but that we try as much as possible to mitigate the impact on municipal budgets where possible. And again, freezing police jurisdictions where they are means no change in public safety services whatsoever unless a municipality decides to do so. And with that, I'll conclude and take your questions.
Why should John Q. Public care about this piece of legislation? What impact is that going to have on them?
For all too many folks, Debbie, they find themselves very frustrated and confused about who is governing them. When they go get a building permit and live in the county, why are they going to the city of XYZ for this permit? When they are stopped by a municipal police officer about enforcement of a municipal ordinance, let's take a sign ordinance for instance, why when I live in the county am I being told by a municipal police officer that I'm violating a municipal sign ordinance? From a business license standpoint, when I'm a business that operates outside the municipal limit, perhaps I rent a house, but I have a city, we're in Fairhope, that is saying, well, you owe us a business license fee, even though you live well outside the city limits. That's confusing for constituents. From a landowner standpoint that's trying to add onto their house, that's trying to subdivide property to give a piece of it to their kids, etc., oftentimes they're having to go through a municipal planning process. And while this doesn't eliminate that, it tries to curtail that some, again, in hopes of trying to get things back on the right side of the line, if you will.
From a local standpoint, this, as you say, this freezes things in place as they are. If you look at the map, there's not a lot of expansion that really, in our area, as you said, they're already bumping into each other. So as far as a local impact.
Guy, you're correct in saying that, and that's one of the reasons I think I've been a little surprised by some of the opposition from some of the local mayors, many of whom I'm sure y'all will go talk to. But the impact is minimal at best, and I've tried to do that, negotiating oftentimes with myself in order to do it, so that we fix this problem, but fix it over time. The intention, of course, as someone who has sat in a county commissioner chair and set a budget, is not to pull the rug out from anybody, but rather over time to get things back on the right side of the line where they should be. Debbie, to follow up to your question, I have a hard time explaining to my constituents why they're being tax policed and governed by folks they can't vote for, when you have a perfectly capable and competent county commission, county building official, county sheriff that can provide an awful lot of these services. So what we have here is a compromise to try to work these issues out over time and do this essentially the way the rest of the country does, so that we don't continue to perpetuate the mess we have now.
It seems like the cities that are growing, like the Fairhope, the Spanish Forts, the Daphnes, more like Gulf Shores, Orange Beach, that they may be the ones concerned because they're looking to the future and they don't know if this is going to get in the way of their growth. I mean, how can you placate those folks or explain it to them, to those, yeah.
James, that's a good question, and I'll simply say this. In Baldwin County, we've had a number of referendums passed recently that precludes legislative annexation around those fast-growing municipalities you mentioned. You will note the Barnwell Landmark District and the Rossington Landmark District, both of which really grew out of I'll go ahead and say a disdain for local municipal authority in those particular areas. They did not want to become the surrounding municipality. They wanted to make sure that they maintained their individual identity. And while the Landmark District did not preclude the enforcement of police jurisdictions at all, and this legislation doesn't either, it did preclude those areas from ever becoming part of the city. And I think that's through legislative annexation, which is how most of that happens. And I think that's instructive to the mayors that are in opposition to this legislation. I will simply say I am hearing from your constituents too, who say simply, why in the world is my municipality wanting to spend money outside the city limits to provide services to people that don't pay the same taxes inside the city that I do? I can't explain that to them either. When budgets are tight, why are we spending money, oftentimes more than what's raised in the police jurisdiction, out in the police jurisdiction? So I think that these mayors too may want to look inside their city where they see support for this legislation as well.
Is time running out, so to speak, because now it's in the House, and is there, how do you convince so many people before that happens? I mean,
well, again, the legislation passed unanimously in the Senate over the League of Municipalities' objection. I was asked on the floor, does the League of Municipalities support this legislation? And the answer is no. They don't. They didn't. This is taking away power and authority and money from municipalities. The question here is a public policy one and a philosophical one of whether or not it should ever really be their power and their money. And I think that's an important fact to talk about, a point to talk about. And I think that's one we'll be talking about as we go forward.
And I know we're looking at Baldwin County here, but this isn't exclusive to Baldwin County.
Oh, it's not. And I will tell you, this is an issue that we deal with across the state. There are countless news stories about problems between municipalities, each other fighting back and forth about police jurisdictions. There are statewide issues, and Guy, you know this from your work with the delegation across the entire state. From the very north to the very south, there have been constitutional amendments passed, for instance, in Madison County that does not allow the enforcement of police jurisdictions at all for that locality. So this is something that plagues the state. It is incredibly confusing for businesses to figure out what jurisdiction they're in, where they owe taxes, where they don't. And these are well-meaning small businesses that are trying to comply with the law. They just can't figure it out. And then on top of that, there are lawsuits after lawsuit from business owners to municipalities, between landowners and municipalities, between municipalities themselves. As a matter of fact, there's one in Baldwin County, if I'm aware, between the city of Foley and the town of Summerdale about money and revenue and where that goes. So what we're trying to do is end all of that and get past all of that in a slow, methodical way that changes the way things have been done in the past, realizes we need a public policy change, and gets things back on the right side of the line.
I mean, I don't know if you can sum this up, I mean, it's complicated, but so right now at this point, are you talking to mayors, or mayors talking to you, and how are you reassuring them, or how are you convincing them?
Well, James, I have talked to mayors. I have regularly quarterly meetings with the mayors in Baldwin County, every elected official in the county, and talk to my mayors as often as they want to talk, and sometimes more often than they want to talk. Some of them are in favor of this legislation. Some of them are not, and I certainly understand and appreciate their position. Anytime you get in a situation where a piece of legislation may be impacting your budget, I can certainly understand their concerns. I'm willing to work with them to try to phase this in so that it can lessen the impact to their budget over time. But again, I think you have to go back from a budgetary standpoint and say, is this good public policy? Should municipalities be basing their revenue projections on business license fees, building permit fees, things that vacillate greatly, collected outside of their municipal limits? Is that something they should be basing their municipal budgets on? It's a worthy public policy debate, and one I'm willing to have with my mayors and councilmen.
Well, what happens next? I mean,
The,
this week or week, what's the?
Great question. The path forward from here is for it to go to the House. The State and Local Government Committee will take it up. We'll have a public hearing in the House likely next week. I expect for there to be some subcommittee work on the bill. Again, I'm happy to continue to work on it and try to get this fixed. Again, it's clearly not something I'm letting go. I've introduced it every year. I feel strongly about it. I expect to make some changes and assist in making some changes in the House. And then it will, assuming those are acceptable to the committee, it will go to the floor for a vote. And once it does that, it will come back to the Senate for essentially a concurrence on any changes that are made in the House, or a non-concurrence.
And this is how many times has it come up?
So this bill's been introduced by me in some form or fashion for 3 years. And this legislation that's currently pending before the House is substantially similar to a bill that left the Senate in 2 years ago that froze police jurisdictions. So this is an ongoing
5
issue.
years or?
Yeah, I mean, and again, my time on the commission was something I advocated for our legislative delegation to take up. So it should not be a surprise to anyone that this is important to Baldwin County and important to me. Thank you all so much for coming today. I appreciate it very much.
Thank you.